Evelyn Carter did not cry when her father sold her. She stood straight, hands folded, jaw locked, the way her mother had taught her before she died, and she listened to the scratch of his pen against the contract, like it was the sound of a door being nailed shut from the outside. $3,000. That was the price of her life. That was the price of 19 years. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel and follow Evelyn's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning they sold Evelyn Carter, the summer heat in Virginia was already unbearable before 9 o'clock. She had woken before dawn with the particular dread of someone who already knew what the day held, but could not stop it from arriving. She had washed her face, braided her hair, put on the blue dress her mother had sewn 3 summers ago, the one with the small pearl buttons down the front, because if she was going to be handed over like livestock at a county fair, she was going to do it looking like a person who mattered. She stood outside her father's study with her hands clasped in front of her, and her back straight and her breathing controlled, and she listened to the voices inside. 2 men. Her father's and another she didn't recognize. Low and deliberate, like men who were accustomed to deciding things. Then her father's voice, too smooth, too easy. She's a fine girl, sensible, quiet. She won't give you trouble. Evelyn closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she pushed the door open. Thomas Carter was sitting behind his mahogany desk in his best coat, the dark green one he wore to church and to creditor meetings, which in recent years had become nearly the same occasion. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of face that had once been handsome and was now simply heavy. He looked up when she entered, and something moved behind his eyes. Not guilt, not quite. Something closer to relief. The man across from him was a stranger. Mid-40s, well-dressed, with the quiet authority of someone who worked on behalf of someone more powerful than himself. A lawyer, she guessed. Or a land agent. He had a leather satchel on his knee, and a contract already open on the desk between them. The ink was still wet. "Evelyn," her father said. "Come in. Close the door." She closed the door. She did not sit. She looked at the paper on the desk. The long column of careful legal language, the figure at the bottom, the signature line, and then she looked at her father. "How much?" she said. Thomas Carter's jaw tightened. "That isn't... How much, Papa?" The stranger answered before her father could redirect the conversation. $3,000, Miss Carter. Payable in full upon the completion of the marriage. $3,000. She turned the number over in her mind like a stone. She thought about what $3,000 meant in 1815 Virginia. How many acres of land, how many years of labor, how many debts it would clear. She thought about the stack of notices she had found in her father's coat pocket last winter, the ones she had quietly replaced without saying anything, because she had understood even then that there were some truths in the Carter household that survived only by not being spoken aloud. And who, she said, is the man paying it? "His name is Nathaniel Cole," the stranger said. "Of Ravenfield. I act as his representative in legal matters." She knew the name. Everyone in the county knew the name. The Coles were one of the oldest families in Virginia, landowners going back to before the Revolution, with an estate so large it had its own mill, its own church, its own post. Nathaniel Cole had inherited the whole of it 2 years ago when his brother Jonathan died, and according to everything she had ever heard, he had not left Ravenfield since. The stories that circulated about him were the kind that gathered weight the further they traveled from their source. That he had been injured in the same incident that killed his brother. That the injury had taken his sight. That he was bitter, volatile, a man who had sealed himself inside his estate and dismissed every servant who spoke too loudly or moved too fast. "He is blind," she said flatly. "He has a condition affecting his vision," the stranger said with the careful neutrality of a man who had been instructed on the precise words to use. "He is blind," she repeated, "and a recluse, and he is paying my father $3,000 for a wife he has never met." "Evelyn." Her father's voice carried a warning. "I want to understand what I'm agreeing to," she said. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the stranger. "Why me?" There are daughters of better families, wealthier families. Why the Carter girl? The stranger shifted. A small movement barely perceptible, but she caught it. Mr. Cole has specific requirements in a wife. Practical, capable, not prone to... He paused. Sentiment. He wants someone who won't cause a scene, she said. He wants someone who will manage a household competently and maintain her discretion. He wants someone, she said slowly, whose father needs the money badly enough that she won't refuse. The room went very quiet. Thomas Carter stood. That will do. Papa. I said that will do, Evelyn. She looked at her father. She looked at him for a long time, long enough that he had to work not to look away. And she thought about all the things she could say about the notices about the gambling, about the 3 years she had managed the household accounts and found ways to stretch money that was never enough, about the fact that she had never once asked him for anything except to be treated as though she was worth more than a debt payment. She said none of it. She said, when? A month, her father said. The ceremony will be at Ravenfield, small, family only. I don't have family. The Coles will provide a witness. She looked back at the contract. She looked at the ink, her father's signature already there, already dry next to a line that still bore Nathaniel Cole's name in someone else's careful hand, as though even his commitment to the arrangement had been made by proxy. I would like to read the contract, she said. Her father started to object. The stranger more practically slid the paper across the desk toward her. She read it, all of it, every clause, every stipulation, every careful legal phrase. She took her time. Neither man spoke. When she was finished, she set it down. She looked at the stranger. There is no provision, she said, for what happens to me if Mr. Cole dies. The stranger blinked. The standard inheritance laws would... The standard inheritance laws in Virginia give a widow 1/3 of her husband's estate if there are children, and 1/2 if there are none. But this contract specifies that the Cole estate passes in its entirety to the Cole family trust in the event of Nathaniel Cole's death, regardless of marital status. She paused. I want a clause added. If Mr. Cole dies within the first 5 years of the marriage, I retain occupancy of the Ravenfield main house for no less than 1 year and receive a settled sum of no less than $500. The stranger stared at her. Thomas Carter said with something between embarrassment and fury, Evelyn, for God's sake! I am agreeing to marry a man I have never met, she said, still calm, still level, who lives alone in a large house, who has already lost one member of his family to unexplained circumstances, and who by your own account has difficulty with his sight. I am not being unreasonable. I am being practical. You told him I was practical. Let him have proof of it. A silence stretched out. Then the stranger cleared his throat, picked up his pen, and began to write. She spent the following month preparing for a life she had not chosen. She did it methodically, the way she did most things, making lists, making arrangements, making peace with what could not be changed, and focusing her attention on what could. She packed her books. She packed her mother's silver-handled brush and the small watercolor of the Blue Ridge Mountains that had hung in the upstairs hallway since she was a child. She packed 4 dresses and a winter coat and her good boots and the notebook she used for household accounts, because whoever or whatever Nathaniel Cole turned out to be, a house that size would have accounts, and accounts required management. She did not pack the blue dress with the pearl buttons. She left it hanging in the wardrobe. She didn't know why exactly. It felt like leaving one thing behind that was entirely hers. The night before she left, she sat at her bedroom window and looked out at the Carter property, the fields gone half wild for lack of proper tending, the barn that needed a new roof, the oak tree her mother had planted the year Evelyn was born, and she made herself a promise. She was not going to Ravenfield to disappear. She was going to Ravenfield to survive. And if survival required her to be sharp and watchful and twice as capable as anyone expected, then she would be all 3. But she would not disappear. She told herself this until she believed it. Then she went to bed. The carriage that came for her the next morning was expensive and impersonal. Black lacquered wood, no family crest, 2 horses, a driver who touched his hat and said nothing beyond "Miss Carter" when she came down the front steps with her trunk. Her father saw her off from the porch. He stood with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders set in that particular way he had when he was uncomfortable, but unwilling to show it, and he said, "You'll do well there. He's a powerful man. This is a good situation." Evelyn looked at him for a moment. "Goodbye, Papa," she said. She climbed into the carriage and did not look back. Ravenfield was 3 hours east of Carterland, closer to the coast where the summer air carried enough salt to taste. She felt the change as the carriage moved through the afternoon heat, the landscape flattening out, the trees growing denser and older, the road narrowing to something shadowed and close. She had her notebook open on her lap, but she wasn't writing. She was watching. The Cole estate announced itself before it came fully into view. First the stone walls bordering the road, then the iron gates standing open, and then the long drive lined with trees, old enough that their canopies nearly met overhead, turning the afternoon light green and cool. The house itself was stone, 3 stories symmetrical with tall windows that caught the late light and threw it back flat and unrevealing. There were flowers along the front path, well tended, recently watered. There was a stable to the left with several horses visible. There was a garden along the east side of the house that had clearly been ambitious once and was now maintained with less enthusiasm than it deserved. It was not a house that looked abandoned. It was a house that looked waiting. A man appeared at the top of the front steps before the carriage had fully stopped. Old 60 at least, with a face so creased it looked like a topographical map, and the careful, attentive posture of someone who had spent decades making himself indispensable. He came down the steps with a steadiness that suggested he had made that descent 1,000 times. "Miss Carter," he said. "I'm William, Mr. Cole's steward. Welcome to Ravenfield." "Thank you, William," she said. She stepped down without waiting for help. "Is Mr. Cole?" "He is in the study." William said something unreadable, crossing his face. "He asked that you be shown to your rooms first to refresh yourself and that you join him for supper at 7. She looked at the house. "I'd rather meet him now," she said, "if he's available." William's expression did something complicated. "Miss Carter, Mr. Cole can be—" "I'm not prone to being managed, William," she said, not unkindly. "I'd like to meet the man I'm going to marry before I take off my traveling coat, if it's all the same to anyone." A pause. Then something that might have been not quite a smile, but an approximation of one passed across the old man's face. "This way," he said. The study was at the back of the house, overlooking the east garden. A heavy door half open. William knocked once and waited. "What is it?" Not a question, a statement. A voice that had decided in advance it did not want to be interrupted. "Miss Carter has arrived, sir," William said. A silence. "I said 7 o'clock." "Yes, sir. Miss Carter preferred not to wait." Another silence. Longer. "Send her in." Evelyn stepped past William into the study. It was a large room, books along 2 full walls, a desk to one side with papers arranged in precise stacks. A window directly across from the door, open to the summer afternoon, and in front of it, a chair. And in the chair, a man. Nathaniel Cole was younger than she had expected. 30, perhaps 32. He was sitting at an angle to the door, his face turned slightly toward the window, and he held a walking cane across his knees with the particular deliberateness of someone who wanted it to be the first thing noticed. He was lean, dark-haired, well-dressed, in a way that was practical rather than decorative. His hands resting on the cane were still. He did not turn to look at her. "Miss Carter," he said. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Sit if you'd like." "I'll stand, thank you." A pause. Something in the quality of it shifted. She had the sudden strange sensation that she was being measured precisely and thoroughly by someone who was not looking at her. "You arrived early," he said. "I prefer to get unpleasant things done before dinner," she said. A very brief pause. "You consider meeting me an unpleasant thing." "I consider meeting anyone under these circumstances unpleasant," she said. The circumstance being that I had no meaningful choice in being here. You signed the contract, he said. My father signed the contract, she said. I amended it. This time the pause was different. His head moved not much, just a fraction, a small adjustment toward her like a man listening for something he hadn't expected to hear. What did you amend? He said. The inheritance clause, she said. I have a copy if you'd like to review it. I've already reviewed it, he said. My lawyer sent me the revised version. He paused. The $500 provision was reasonable, she said. I was going to say unexpected. I had no guarantee I wasn't walking into a situation specifically designed to be disadvantageous to me, she said. I still don't. But at least now it is less so. He was quiet for a moment. The afternoon light came through the window and lay across the floor between them. My lawyer tells me, Nathaniel Cole said, that you read the original contract for 12 minutes before requesting the amendment. 14, she said. There were several clauses worth reviewing twice. Silence again. He turned his face back toward the window. She watched him, the stillness of him, the controlled precision of how he held himself, the way his hands rested on the cane with a steadiness that struck her as deliberate. She thought of something. Mr. Cole, she said. Yes? When I came in, you were facing the window. The door is behind you and to the left. You heard me come in, which is understandable. But when you told me to sit... She stopped. Yes, he said. You gestured, she said carefully, toward the chair that is directly to your right, which you cannot see from where you are facing. The room went very still. Nathaniel Cole said nothing. A blind man, Evelyn said, her voice even, would not gesture toward a specific chair in a direction he could not see. Another silence, longer than any of the ones before it. Then slowly Nathaniel Cole turned his head. He looked at her, not with the vague, unfocused gaze of a man who could not see, with the precise, sharp, fully present attention of a man who had been looking at her in one way or another since the moment she walked through the door. His eyes were gray, clear, not fogged, not absent. You notice things, he said. You're not blind, she said. He held her gaze for a long moment. No, he said quietly. I'm not. The summer air moved through the window. Somewhere in the garden outside, something stirred. Evelyn stood in the center of the study of a man who had just dismantled the first and most fundamental thing she had been told about him, and she kept her breathing steady, and she looked back at him, and she thought there is something much larger going on in this house than a rich man wanting a practical wife. Why, she said. That, Nathaniel Cole said, is a long answer. I have time, she said. I live here now. He looked at her for another moment, something moving in his expression that was neither apology nor calculation, but something more complicated than either. Sit down, Miss Carter, he said. And this time, he didn't gesture toward the chair. He looked directly at it. Nathaniel Cole did not offer her an explanation that evening. He offered her a chair, a glass of water, and exactly 47 words before he stood, picked up his cane, still carrying it. She noticed, still performing, and told her that supper would be at 7, and that William would show her to her rooms. She let him go, not because she had nothing to say. She had a great deal to say. But she had learned early and thoroughly that the most useful thing a person could do in an unfamiliar situation was to stop talking and start paying attention. There would be time for questions. First, she needed to understand what she was asking questions about. William showed her upstairs without volunteering anything. He was polite, precise, and entirely closed, the kind of man who had served one household long enough that his loyalty had become structural, as fundamental to him as bone. She did not press him. She thanked him. She unpacked her trunk herself when he offered to send a maid, and she spent the remaining hour before supper walking the length of her rooms, a bedroom, a small sitting area, a window facing the garden, and thinking. Nathaniel Cole was not blind. That was the first fact. She set it at the center of everything else and worked outward from it. He had been performing blindness for at least 2 years, according to everything she had ever heard about him. Long enough that it had become the defining fact of his reputation. Long enough that his lawyer referred to it in careful, managed language. Long enough that the servants moved around him with the particular deference of people who had been trained not to challenge the story they were living inside. He had chosen her, knowing she was the daughter of Thomas Carter, the county magistrate. He had amended the contract without objection when she pushed back, which meant he either had not expected resistance or had expected it and was unconcerned by it. He had said when she caught him, "You notice things." Not an accusation. Not alarm. Almost something that sounded like relief. She sat with that word for a long time. Relief. Supper was the two of them, at opposite ends of a table built for 12, with William overseeing, and two young servants moving quietly in and out. Nathaniel Cole was carrying the cane again. He used it as he crossed the room to his chair, navigated around the table's edge, sat down. Every movement was practiced and deliberate, and now that she knew what she was looking at, it was almost exquisite. The precision of the performance, the way he kept his gaze unfocused without letting it go, entirely vacant, the small hesitations built in at just the right moments. He was very good at it. She waited until the servants had withdrawn before she spoke. "Are they part of it?" she asked. "The servants. Do they know?" He reached for his water glass without looking at it, found it immediately without fumbling, and said, "William knows. The others don't." "How many staff?" "8, including William. And none of the 7 have noticed what I noticed in under 3 minutes." He was quiet for a moment. "People see what they expect to see. That's not an answer." "It's the truest answer I have," he said. "I was blind for 6 weeks after Jonathan died. Actually blind. The physician said trauma, said it might be permanent, said give it time. It wasn't permanent. But by the time my sight came back, the story had settled, and I decided to let it stay settled." "Why?" He picked up his fork, set it down again. "Because whoever killed my brother believed I couldn't identify them, and I needed them to keep believing that." The word "killed" sat between them like something physical. "The official report," she said carefully, "said your brother died in a duel." "My brother," Nathaniel said, "did not fight duels. He considered them a barbaric waste of men who had other options." He paused. "Jonathan Cole was 26 years old, the most deliberate man I have ever known, and he was shot from a position no legitimate dueling opponent would have been standing in. The angle was wrong. I know because I was there." Evelyn set her fork down. "You were there," she said. "I found him," he said. 30 minutes after, before anyone else arrived. "I saw the position of the wound. I saw the ground. I saw enough." He paused. "And then I saw nothing at all for 6 weeks. And when I could see again, I understood that whoever had arranged Jonathan's death believed they had left no living witness." "But you didn't go to the magistrate," she said. Something moved across his face. Controlled. Careful. "No," he said. "I did not go to the magistrate." She held very still. "My father," she said. It was not a question. "Your father sealed the report," Nathaniel said. "Ruled it a legitimate duel within 4 days of Jonathan's death. No inquest. No witnesses called. No second examination." He looked at her directly, not performing now, not managing, just looking. "I'm sorry. I know that's—" "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't apologize for the truth." She took a breath. "Is that why you chose me? Because my father signed the report?" "Partly," he said. "And partly because I needed someone inside this house who was not already part of the story, who had no reason to protect it." He paused. "And partly because my lawyer told me you read the contract for 14 minutes and then added a clause no one had thought to ask for." A beat. "I needed someone who looks at a document and sees what isn't there." She looked at him across the length of that too long table. "You could have told me this in the carriage," she said, "before I arrived, before the ceremony. I couldn't be certain you wouldn't go to your father. I just found out my father may have covered up a murder, she said. Does it seem like I'm running to tell him about it? Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. No, he said. It doesn't. Then here is what I need from you, she said. I need all of it. Everything you know, everything you suspect, every name you've connected to this. I need to understand what I've walked into, because I have apparently walked into it whether I consented to or not, and I would rather be walking forward with information than stumbling around in the dark. He looked at her for a long moment. That, he said slowly, is the first thing anyone has said to me in 2 years that didn't sound like management. I'm not here to manage you, she said. I'm here because I had $3,000 worth of no choice. But I am here. So, talk to me. He talked. Not all of it. Not that first night, but enough. He told her about Jonathan, who had been the better of the two of them by any measure their father would have applied, and some measures he wouldn't. He told her that Jonathan had been involved in something in the months before his death meetings. He wouldn't explain documents he kept locked, a tension that had built in him slowly and then all at once. He told her that a woman named Isabella Vance had been connected to Jonathan in some capacity he had never fully understood, and that Isabella Vance was now a frequent presence at the Carrickmore Assembly in Richmond, and that she had in the months since Jonathan's death accumulated a notable amount of influence for a woman whose origins were unclear. What kind of influence? Evelyn asked. Social, financial. She has the ear of several men in positions your father would recognize. He paused. She was one of the last people to see Jonathan alive. Did you tell that to anyone? I told your father, he said with a flatness that contained a great deal more than flatness. He noted it in his report as an unverified claim and proceeded to close the case. Evelyn thought about her father. His heavy face, his relieved eyes, the way he had said she won't give you trouble, as though what he most needed from her was absence. She thought about what it meant that he had taken $3,000 from a man who suspected him of concealing a murder. She thought about what it meant that he had taken it anyway. There's something else, she said. Isn't there? Nathaniel looked at her. Jonathan had a document, he said. I believe he was building a case. Against someone, possibly multiple people, involving land fraud on a significant scale. Several families in this county hold title to parcels of land that Jonathan believed were fraudulently registered. If the registrations were invalidated, the financial impact would be... He stopped. Who would it affect? She said. Your father, he said. Among others. The room was very quiet. He knew, she said. Not her father this time. Jonathan. Jonathan knew what my father had done or what he was doing, and he was building evidence. And then he died. Yes, Nathaniel said. And my father closed the case. Yes. And then you, 6 months ago, contacted him about a marriage contract. Yes. And he agreed, she said slowly. And he took the money and he sent me here. She paused. Did he know you suspected him? Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. I believe, he said carefully, that your father is a man who has convinced himself he did nothing wrong. That what happened to Jonathan was complicated and regrettable, but not his responsibility. I believe he took the money because he needed it, and because he told himself this arrangement was merely practical. And he sent me here, she said, because he thought I was the safest person to place in a blind man's house. Someone who would observe without understanding. Someone who would keep his household in order without asking the wrong questions. She paused. He underestimated both of us. Something shifted in Nathaniel's expression. Not quite a smile. Something older than a smile. Yes, he said. He did. Bed. She slept badly that first night, which she had expected. She lay in the unfamiliar dark and went through everything Nathaniel had told her, the way she went through account books methodically, looking for what didn't add up, looking for the thing that was present by its absence. Jonathan Cole, 26. Dead in June of 1813. 2 years ago this summer. A sealed report. an official ruling of a legitimate duel. Her father's signature at the bottom. A woman named Isabella Vance, who had been one of the last people to see Jonathan alive, and who now moved through Richmond society with a confidence that seemed to have origins in something other than birth or breeding. A set of land registrations that Jonathan had believed to be fraudulent, documents he had kept locked, a case he had been building, and Nathaniel watching, waiting, performing blindness in his own house, in his own life for 2 years, because whoever had arranged his brother's death believed they had left no living witness, and Nathaniel needed them to keep believing it. She thought about that kind of patience, the weight of it, the cost. She thought about what it took to wake up every morning and choose the same performance day after day without slipping, without breaking, without letting the grief or the fury out in any way that could be seen. She thought that she had misjudged him in the carriage and in the first moments of the study when she had categorized him as powerful and closed and self-interested. He was all of those things. But he was also something she hadn't expected. He was alone in this, in a way that had nothing to do with isolation. She understood that kind of alone. She got up before dawn and found her notebook. Gug. She was at the breakfast table with her notebook open and a list half completed when Nathaniel came in. He was carrying the cane. She did not comment on it. He stopped when he saw her. "You're up early," he said. "I made a list," she said. "Sit down." He sat with the particular expression of a man who was not accustomed to being told to sit down in his own house and was deciding how to feel about it. "The land registrations," she said. Jonathan believed they were fraudulent. What did he have? What was his evidence? "I don't know the specifics," Nathaniel said. "I know he had documents, copies of original land grants, I believe, and something he'd obtained from the county records office. But I don't know where he kept them or whether they survived." "His rooms." "Searched, twice. I found nothing. By you. The first time. The second time by someone else while I was not able to see." His jaw tightened slightly. "Someone entered this house in the second week after Jonathan's death and went through his study. I heard them. I couldn't—" He stopped. "I couldn't do anything about it." She wrote something in her notebook. "So they may have taken whatever Jonathan had gathered. It's possible, but Jonathan was meticulous. If he was building a case, he would have understood the risk. He may have made copies. He may have placed them somewhere other than the obvious locations." "Do you know who he trusted?" she said. "He trusted me," Nathaniel said quietly. "But he hadn't told me the full extent of what he was doing. He said he would tell me when it was ready. He said he didn't want me involved until he was certain. That he needed one Cole who was clean." He paused. "He was protecting me. And then someone killed him before it was ready." "Yes." She looked at her list. "Isabella Vance," she said. "Tell me more about her." Something happened to Nathaniel's face that she couldn't quite name. "She came to the county 2 years before Jonathan died. She presented herself as a widow, a Colonel Vance, she said, dead in the war. She was compelling, socially skilled, the sort of woman who enters a room and immediately understands its architecture." Did Jonathan love her? The question was blunt. He blinked. "I don't know," he said. "I think he was drawn to her. I think she encouraged it. And I think—" He stopped. "What?" "I think she knew what he was investigating," he said. "I think she may have been positioned specifically to know, to be close to him, to monitor what he found." He paused. "I have no proof of this." "It's on the list," Evelyn said, writing. He looked at her notebook. "What else is on the list?" he said. "The names of the other landholders Jonathan suspected, the location of the county records office, the name of whoever was Jonathan's second in the alleged duel, because someone had to have agreed to stand in that role, and that person either lied or was lied to. And," she paused, pen still moving, "the name of the physician who treated you when your sight went, the one who confirmed the blindness." Nathaniel went very still. "Why the physician?" he said. "Because your sight returned," she said. "And the physician either knows it did and said nothing or doesn't know because you never told him." She looked up. Which is it? A silence. I never told him, Nathaniel said. So he believes you are still blind. Yes. And if someone wanted to verify that Nathaniel Cole was genuinely incapacitated, had no sight, posed no threat as a witness, they might ask the physician. Nathaniel was very still now, the kind of stillness that meant something was happening behind his eyes that he wasn't letting onto his face. They would get confirmation, he said. From a source they trusted, she said. Which means your performance has been more effective than you may have realized. The people who need to believe you're blind have independent corroboration. She paused. That's actually useful. We should keep it. He stared at her. We, he said. She looked up from her notebook, met his eyes. You brought me into this house, she said. You told me the truth, some of it anyway. You gave me a name, a set of facts, and a direction. You did that because you needed someone who notices things. She closed the notebook. I notice things. So yes, we. Something moved through his expression. Something she couldn't fully read. Something between gratitude and a more complicated emotion she didn't have a name for yet. You should know, he said carefully, that this is not without danger. If Isabella Vance is connected to Jonathan's death in the way I believe she is, if your father is involved in the degree I suspect, then being in this house knowing what you now know is dangerous, she said. Yes, I understood that when you told me my father sealed the report. She paused. I also understand that I have more protection here than I did in my father's house, because here the man I'm living with is not the one hiding something. He looked at her for a long moment. Your father, he said quietly, told me you were sensible and quiet. My father, she said, has not had a real conversation with me in 4 years. A pause. And then finally, and briefly, and in a way that changed his whole face, Nathaniel Cole almost smiled. No, he said. I don't imagine he has. July settled over Ravenfield, the way Virginia summers always did, with a weight and a heat that made the air feel like something you moved through rather than breathed. The household found its rhythms. Evelyn took over the management of the accounts without being asked, because the accounts were a mess, and because having a legitimate reason to review every financial record in the house was, she understood, an advantage she intended to keep. She was 3 days into the ledgers when she found the first thing. It was a payment. Small $60 made to a name she didn't recognize 9 months after Jonathan's death, recorded simply as a consulting fee. She noted it and said nothing. The second thing came a week later in the form of a letter she was not supposed to find. She found it because she was thorough and because the desk in the downstairs sitting room had a false bottom that was not upon patient examination as false as it appeared. The letter was short. It was addressed to Nathaniel and had never been opened. The seal, she turned it over, bore an impression she didn't recognize immediately, but she had seen it somewhere. It took her a full day to remember where. It was the same seal on one of the documents in her father's study, a document she had seen once briefly as a child and had forgotten until this moment. She brought both the letter and the ledger entry to Nathaniel that evening. He looked at the letter's seal for a long time. Where did you find this? He said. Desk in the sitting room, she said. False bottom. He looked at her. I searched that desk. You searched it as a man who had recently lost his sight, she said not unkindly. I searched it as a woman who learned at 14 that the most important things in a household are never where they're supposed to be. He held the letter, did not open it. Do you know whose seal that is? She asked. Yes, he said. Whose? He set the letter down on the desk between them. It belongs to a man named Gerald Fitch, he said. He is one of the largest landowners in this county. He is also, he paused, one of the men whose land title Jonathan believed was fraudulent. He looked at her. And he is your father's oldest friend. The summer heat pressed through the window. Evelyn looked at the unopened letter. She thought about the sealed report. She thought about $60 paid to an unnamed consultant 9 months after a man died. She thought about her father's face on the morning she left. That particular relief she had read as discomfort, but now understood was something else entirely. "Open it," she said. Nathaniel broke the seal. He read the letter twice. Then he set it down and looked at her with the kind of expression that comes after something you have suspected for a long time is finally irreversibly confirmed. "What does it say?" she asked. "It says," he said slowly, "the woman is in place. The records have been moved. If the blind man stays blind, there is nothing to find." The sitting room was very quiet. Evelyn said, "The woman." "Yes. Isabella Vance." "I believe so. She was placed," Evelyn said, "not just nearby Jonathan, at Ravenfield, or positioned to be." She paused. "She's not finished, is she? Whatever she came here to do, it isn't finished." Nathaniel looked at her. "No," he said. "It isn't. She's been quiet since Jonathan's death, consolidating, I think, waiting to see if anything came loose." He paused. "A new person entering this house would be noticed, evaluated. She will want to know who you are and what you know. Then she'll come to me," Evelyn said. "Yes, she'll be charming, welcoming. She'll want to be your friend." Evelyn picked up her notebook. "Good," she said. "I have a great deal of questions she can help me answer." Nathaniel was looking at her with that complicated expression again, the one she was beginning to recognize as what his face did when she said something he hadn't predicted. "Evelyn," he said. It was the first time he had used her first name. She looked up. "Be careful," he said. It came out without management, without calculation, just that clean and direct, and something in the way he said it made her understand that he was not giving her a tactical warning. He was afraid for her. She held that for a moment. Then she nodded. "Always," she said. She left the letter on the desk between them, the broken seal, the few devastating lines, the handwriting that connected her father and a dead man and a woman who was not finished, and she went upstairs and sat at her window in the dark and breathed and told herself, as she had on the last night in her father's house, that she was not going to disappear. The difference now was that she believed it. Isabella Vance arrived at Ravenfield on a Tuesday morning, 11 days after Evelyn had found the letter with the broken seal. She came without invitation, which was, Evelyn had already learned entirely, characteristic of a woman who understood that the surest way to make an entrance was to make it before anyone had time to prepare for it. William announced her at the front door with the particular flatness of a man who had been expecting this, and was not pleased about it. Evelyn was in the sitting room with the account ledgers when she heard the voice in the hallway, warm, carrying the kind of voice that had been trained to fill a room without appearing to try. "I simply had to come and welcome the new Mrs. Cole. I told myself, Isabella, it has been nearly 2 weeks, and that poor girl is sitting in that great house with no one but servants and a well." A pause. A delicate, practiced pause. "I told myself it was unconscionable to wait any longer." Evelyn closed the ledger. She stood. She smoothed the front of her dress with both hands, not from nervousness, but from the same instinct that made her braid her hair straight and button her collar to the top on the morning she'd been sold. If you're going to walk into something, walk into it looking like a person who matters. She went to the doorway. Isabella Vance was 34 or 35, with the kind of beauty that had been carefully maintained and strategically deployed for long enough that it had become a kind of fluency. She moved in it the way some women moved in money, as though it were simply the medium through which she operated. She was carrying flowers. Of course she was carrying flowers. Dark red ones, freshly cut, still damp. She saw Evelyn, and her whole face opened into warmth. "Mrs. Cole," she said, "I am so glad to finally meet you." "Miss Vance," Evelyn said, "please come in." She did not take the flowers immediately. She let Isabella carry them one beat longer than was comfortable, just long enough to watch what happened to the woman's expression when the expected response didn't come on schedule. A flicker, small, controlled immediately. But there. Then Evelyn smiled and took them. "They're beautiful," she said. "Thank you." They sat in the front parlor with tea, and Isabella talked. She was extraordinarily good at talking. She moved from topic to topic with the ease of a woman who had spent years making conversation feel like intimacy. Personal details offered early questions, asked with apparent genuine interest. Small confidences extended like gifts. Within 20 minutes, she had told Evelyn about her late husband, her years in Richmond, her fondness for the Cole estate and its grounds, and her deep and she emphasized long-standing concern for Nathaniel's well-being. "He has been so isolated," Isabella said with a sadness that looked entirely real. "Since Jonathan. It changed him, as you can imagine. They were very close." She paused. "I worried when I heard he was marrying that he might have been well, that someone might take advantage of his situation." "His blindness, you mean?" Evelyn said. "Among other things," Isabella said. She looked at Evelyn with an expression of careful, gentle scrutiny. "He is a vulnerable man, Mrs. Cole, whatever he might wish to project. He lost his brother, his sight, his entire. He's been so alone in that loss. I only hope that the person he's chosen to share his life understands the particular care he requires." Evelyn looked at her over the rim of her teacup. "He requires a great deal less care than people seem to assume," she said pleasantly. "He is one of the sharpest men I have ever spoken with, but I appreciate your concern." A pause. Something recalibrated behind Isabella's eyes. "Of course," she said warmly. "Of course he is." "How well did you know Jonathan?" Evelyn asked. The shift was instantaneous, not visible on Isabella's face, which remained warm and open, but present in the fraction of a second that passed before she answered. Evelyn felt it the way you feel a change in the air before weather. "We were acquainted," Isabella said. "He was a kind man. His death was a great loss to this community." "Were you here when it happened?" "I was in Richmond," Isabella said. "I came back when I heard." "Of course," Evelyn said. "It must have been devastating." "Terrible," Isabella agreed. "Did you attend the inquest?" "There I believe there wasn't a formal inquest. The magistrate—" Isabella paused. "Your father, I understand." "Yes," Evelyn said. "My father." "He ruled it a duel," Isabella said. "Which is well. A tragic thing, but not uncommon. Men of that class, and that time." She shook her head, a beautifully executed shake of the head. "Jonathan had enemies. Strong men often do." "Do you know who his second was?" Evelyn said. "In the duel." Isabella looked at her. This time the pause was a full second longer. "I'm afraid I wouldn't know that," she said. "As I said, I was in Richmond." "Of course," Evelyn said. "Forgive me, I've been trying to understand the circumstances. For Nathaniel's sake. He doesn't speak of it often, but I can see it weighs on him." "Naturally," Isabella said, and something in her voice had cooled by 3 degrees, not enough for anyone who wasn't looking to notice, but Evelyn was looking. "You are very attentive to him." "I try to be," Evelyn said simply. "He is my husband." Isabella left 40 minutes later with another warm smile and an invitation to call on her in Richmond whenever Evelyn wished. Evelyn saw her to the door, thanked her for the flowers, and waited until the sound of the carriage had fully faded. Then she went to find Nathaniel. He was in the library. Not performing the cane was propped against the far wall, and he was standing at the desk with a document open, reading without any pretense of difficulty. He looked up when she came in. "Well," he said. "She is extraordinarily accomplished," Evelyn said. "And she is frightened." "Frightened," he repeated. "Not of me specifically, not yet. But she came here to evaluate the situation to determine what I know, what you've told me, whether I'm a complication." She sat down. "She asked me within the first 20 minutes whether Nathaniel had been well, whether he had her word was episodes. She wanted to know if he had been stable." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "She's been the source of that story, the instability narrative. If anyone began to question my blindness, the backup is that I am mentally unreliable. Which makes anything you claim about Jonathan's death the word of a broken, unstable man," Evelyn said. Very efficient. She paused. She also told me Jonathan had enemies. Strong men often do. She said it without being asked. She's been managing that story for 2 years, Nathaniel said. Enemies plural, dispersed, no one specific. Just the vague implication that Jonathan's death was the consequence of a complicated life. And my father gave it official weight, Evelyn said. Which means even if someone questioned it, they'd be questioning a magistrate's ruling on a closed case. She paused. Nathaniel, the $60, the consulting fee in the ledger. What about it? I've been checking the dates. It was paid 8 months after Jonathan died, and 3 months after you would have recovered your sight. She looked at him. Someone paid someone to check on you, to confirm you were still blind. He was very still. You think it was Isabella? He said. I think she needed to know if her insurance policy was still intact, Evelyn said. You can't see the physician confirms it. The magistrate signed the ruling she's safe. But if you could see... She paused. She'd have a problem. Then she still doesn't know, he said. No, but she suspects something has changed. Your marriage is the change. A man who has been entirely reclusive for 2 years does not suddenly acquire a wife without a reason, and Isabella Vance did not get where she is by ignoring reasons. Evelyn folded her hands in her lap. She'll move soon. Whatever she has planned, she'll accelerate it. Nathaniel came around the desk and sat across from her. He looked tired, she thought. Not weak, but carrying weight that had no good place to be set down. There's something I haven't told you, he said. I know, she said. There are several things. He looked at her. The land documents, he said. Jonathan's evidence. I said I didn't know where he kept it. That was not entirely true. She waited. I know where he would have kept it, Nathaniel said. I know because I knew Jonathan. He had a habit, everything important he kept close to something he loved. When he was a boy, it was the stables. When he was older, it was, there's a place on the south edge of the property, a creek. He used to go there when he needed to think. He built a shelter there years ago more for the principle of the thing than practical use. You haven't looked, Evelyn said. I couldn't go there without being seen, he said. A blind man walking to the South Creek alone is not a blind man. And I couldn't send William if anyone was watching the property. William going there specifically would signal something. He paused. I've been waiting. For what? For someone who could go without raising questions, he said. A new wife curious about the property, walking the grounds. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. You have been planning this for longer than 11 days, she said. Yes, he said. The marriage, she said slowly. The specific choice of me. The amendment I made to the contract, you weren't surprised by it, because I'd already read everything I could find about you, he said. Your father's correspondence, the accounts you managed, a letter you wrote 3 years ago to the County Agricultural Board disputing an easement claim on Carter land which you won. He paused. You were meticulous, and you were right, and the board granted your appeal unanimously. She sat with this for a moment. You chose me, she said, because you needed someone to walk to a creek. I chose you, he said, because I needed someone who would walk to a creek, find whatever Jonathan left there, understand what it meant, and know what to do with it. He paused. I have not been wrong. You also, she said, could have told me all of this when I arrived. I needed to see who you were first, he said. Anyone can read as capable on paper. She looked at him steadily. And now, he said quietly, I trust you. The word landed differently than she expected. She had been given trust as a management tool before her father trusting her to run the household, which meant he trusted her to absorb all the difficulty and produce no complications. This was not that. She could hear the difference. She stood. I'll go this afternoon, she said. Is there anything specific I should be looking for? A tin box, he said. Approximately this size. He held his hands apart. Jonathan liked mechanical locks, 3-digit. The combination is his mother's birth year, 1769. All right, she said. And then, because it seemed like the kind of thing that should be said, Nathaniel, the things you haven't told me, I understand why you held them. But going forward, I need all of it. Not the pieces you've decided I can handle. All of it. He held her gaze. All right, he said. She found the shelter without difficulty. A low structure against a stand of old trees, weathered and unassuming. The kind of thing that looked like it had always been there. She did not go directly to it. She walked the creek path first all the way down and back, because if anyone was watching the south end of the property, she wanted to look like a woman learning the land and not a woman conducting a search. On the second pass, she stepped inside. It took her 7 minutes. The box was under a false floor panel that Jonathan had built with the same quiet thoroughness she was beginning to understand was characteristic of him. It was exactly as Nathaniel had described. She turned the lock. 1769. It opened. Inside, 17 pages of documents close written in a careful hand and a folded letter sealed with no crest. She did not read them there. She tucked the entire box under her arm, walked back to the house at a pace that suggested nothing more than a woman carrying something in from the garden, and went directly to the library. Nathaniel was still there. He saw her face when she came through the door, and he stood. She set the box on the desk and opened it. He looked at the documents for a long moment without speaking. Then he sat down. He picked up the first page. He read. She watched him read. She watched his expression move through something she had no name for. Recognition, grief, fury, and something beneath all three that looked like the particular pain of a man confirming what he already knew was true. "It's all here," he said quietly. Everything he'd gathered. She looked at the top page. Names, dates, parcel numbers, and alongside each one in Jonathan's careful hand, a notation registered. Forged. Duplicate. Invalid. 7 land titles. 7 families, including at position 4 on the list. Thomas Carter, Magistrate, Carter County, Virginia, including at position 7, Gerald Fitch. Gerald Fitch, she said. Jonathan's note there. Nathaniel pointed. She looked. Beside Fitch's name, primary forger. Original registration destroyed. Fitch holds the instrument. Fitch forged the documents, she said. My father registered them and sealed Jonathan's case when Jonathan came too close, Nathaniel said. And Isabella. She looked at the folded letter. She picked it up. May I? Please, he said. She broke the seal and read. The letter was from Jonathan, addressed to no one, or perhaps to himself, or to whatever came after. It was dated 6 weeks before his death. She read it once, silently. Then she read the critical section aloud. I have confirmed the connection between Isabella Vance and Gerald Fitch. They are not recent acquaintances. They have operated together for at least 5 years across 3 counties. Isabella's role is intelligence. She positions herself near men of property and power and reports their vulnerabilities. Fitch acts on the information. I believe she was sent specifically to monitor this household and determine what I knew. I do not know yet who gave the original order. There is someone above Fitch, I am certain of it. I have not yet been able to determine the name. I will not approach Thomas Carter. I do not trust him. I am writing this in case something happens before I am ready. If anyone finds this, please give it to my brother. He will know what to do. The library was very quiet. Nathaniel had turned his face away from her. She could see the line of his jaw. She gave him a moment. Someone above Fitch, she said, after the moment had passed. Yes, he said. His voice was controlled. Just. Jonathan didn't find the name. No. He paused. But he got close enough that someone decided he couldn't be allowed to get closer. The letter from Fitch, she said. The one I found in the desk. The woman is in place. He was referring to Isabella. She was already in position before Jonathan died, which means the order to watch Jonathan came from somewhere above Fitch. She paused. That's who we're missing. That's the name we need. Yes, Nathaniel said. And whoever it is, she said slowly, has enough power to position Isabella to instruct Fitch to ensure my father signed a false ruling and stayed signed. That's not a small man. She paused. Nathaniel. The Carrickmore Assembly. Isabella attends regularly, he said. And the men whose names are on this list? Several of them. And my father? A pause. He attended last spring. Then that is where this comes to a head, she said. Whatever happens, it happens in a public space with enough witnesses that it cannot be managed afterward. With the documents. She looked at the box. With Jonathan's letter. Nathaniel looked at her. You're talking about a public accusation, he said. In front of half the county. I'm talking about the only circumstance under which a sealed magistrate's ruling can be overturned without years of private legal maneuvering, she said. Public record, public witnesses. If the evidence is presented openly, if enough people hear it, see it can verify it, there is no one person who can make it disappear afterward. He was silent for a moment. Isabella will be there, he said. Good, Evelyn said. Your father may be there. Better. He looked at her for a long time. There's one more thing, he said. She waited. The night Jonathan died, he said, there was a witness, someone who was at the edge of the property, a tenant from the south farmland. He saw something. He came to me afterward privately. He was afraid. Nathaniel paused. He told me the shot came from behind a stand of trees 30 feet from the dueling position. No legitimate second, no legitimate opponent would have been there. He said there was a figure. He could not identify them. But he said... He stopped. What? She said. He said the figure was wearing a gray riding coat, Nathaniel said. And that before they left they spoke to someone, a woman. Evelyn was very still. A woman in a gray coat, she said. He wasn't certain it was a woman. He said the figure was slight. The voice was low. He couldn't be certain. Where is this witness now? She said. Still on the south farmland, Nathaniel said. He came to me once right after. He has not come forward publicly because he is afraid. He has a family. He doesn't trust that the ruling will be overturned. He doesn't trust that he'll be protected. If he testifies at the assembly, Evelyn said. It corroborates the angle of the wound, Nathaniel said. It places a second person at the scene. It breaks the official narrative apart. Can he be persuaded? Nathaniel looked at her. I believe he can be told that the evidence is solid enough now that his testimony is the last piece rather than the only piece, that he would not be standing alone. He paused. That someone was standing there with something worth standing for. She looked at him. Who is he? His name is Samuel Briggs, Nathaniel said. He's been on this property for 12 years. He trusted Jonathan, and he came to me when he had every reason not to. He paused. He deserves better than what he's gotten. We'll go to him tomorrow, she said. Together. A blind man and his wife visiting a tenant farmer is unremarkable, Nathaniel said. Then we are a blind man, and his wife visiting a tenant farmer, she said. She picked up Jonathan's letter and folded it carefully back along its original creases. She laid it on top of the documents in the tin box and closed the lid. Nathaniel. Jonathan said he didn't know who was above Fitch, but he was close. Close enough to be killed for it. Whatever he found in those last weeks, whatever he was building toward, it's somewhere. In a name. In a connection we haven't seen yet. I know, he said. We'll find it, she said. He looked at her, then really looked the way he had in the study on the first day, when she had caught him. The way that had no performance in it and no management. Just the direct and unguarded attention of a man who had been alone in something terrible for 2 years, and had finally, in whatever incomplete and complicated way, found someone standing on the same ground. Evelyn, he said. Yes, she said. I'm glad you read the contract for 14 minutes, he said. She looked at him. And for the first time since she had climbed into that impersonal black carriage and told herself she would not disappear, she felt something in her chest that was not bracing or resolution or controlled practicality. It was something much quieter than any of those things. "So am I," she said. She picked up the box. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame and turned back. "One more question," she said. "Yes." "The assembly," she said. "When is the next one?" Nathaniel looked at her. 3 weeks, he said. "Then we have 3 weeks," she said. She walked out of the library with Jonathan Cole's evidence under her arm and the name they were still missing, turning over and over in her mind, like a combination she hadn't quite unlocked yet, and she thought about the gray riding coat and the slight figure and the low voice and the woman who had walked into Ravenfield with dark red flowers and a smile like a door opening, and she thought, "I know you. I don't have your name yet, but I know you, and I am going to find it." Samuel Briggs was a man who had spent 12 years learning how to make himself small. He was not a small man, physically broad through the chest, weathered with the particular solidity of someone who had worked land long enough that the land had worked back. But he had the posture of someone who had decided at some point that visibility was dangerous and had been practicing invisibility ever since. When Evelyn and Nathaniel came to his door the morning after she had found Jonathan's box, he opened it, looked at them both and said nothing for a full 5 seconds. Then he stepped back and let them in. His wife was at the back of the house. He sent her to the garden with a quietness that told Evelyn this was a man who protected people by keeping them outside the radius of dangerous things. He sat. They sat. Nathaniel had the cane across his knees. Evelyn had her notebook closed on her lap. "You know why we're here," Nathaniel said. It wasn't a question. Samuel Briggs looked at his hands. "I wondered when you'd come. It's been 2 years," Nathaniel said. "I know how long it's been," Samuel said. There was no accusation in it, just the flat weight of a man who had been counting. "We have the documents," Evelyn said. "Jonathan's evidence, 17 pages. Land titles, names, dates, the forgery chain. We have a letter in Jonathan's own hand naming Isabella Vance and Gerald Fitch and stating explicitly that the angle of the wound was wrong." She paused. "We have enough to take to the assembly in 3 weeks. What we don't have is a living witness who was at the scene." Samuel looked at her. It was the look of a man evaluating whether a person was telling the truth or telling him what he needed to hear in order to do something that would get him killed. "You're Thomas Carter's daughter," he said. "Yes," she said. "And Thomas Carter's name is on Jonathan's list. 4th position. Fraudulent land registration, knowing receipt." She held Samuel's gaze. "I am not here to protect my father. I am here because a man was murdered and the people responsible are still free, and I have a box full of evidence and 3 weeks and 1 missing piece." Samuel looked at Nathaniel. "You trust her?" "Completely," Nathaniel said. No hesitation. Samuel Briggs let out a long, slow breath through his nose. "The figure by the trees," he said. "I've thought about it every day since. What I saw and what I couldn't see and what it means that I said nothing publicly." He paused. The coat was gray. Not a riding coat exactly, more like a long coat, the kind a woman might wear traveling. Slim. I thought it was a woman because of how they moved. Quick and light. Not like a man moving fast, like a woman who knew exactly where she was going and had no reason to hurry because everything was already done. Evelyn wrote in her notebook. "The voice," she said. "You told Nathaniel someone spoke before they left." "To a man," Samuel said. "Waiting with horses further back. I couldn't hear the words, just the tone, low and calm, like giving instructions to someone who already knew what to do." He paused. "And then they were gone." "Would you testify to this?" Evelyn said. "At the assembly, with Nathaniel present, with the documents present." Samuel looked at the table. "My wife," he said. "Would remain on Cole property," Nathaniel said immediately. "Under William's watch, for as long as needed. You have my word." Another silence. Samuel's hands pressed flat against the table. The decision moved across his face the way weather moves slowly, then all at once. "All right," he said. 12 days before the assembly, Evelyn found the name. She found it the way she found most things, by being thorough in a place no one expected her to be thorough. She had been working through the remaining household documents, the ones that predated her arrival, and she had developed the habit of reading everything twice, once for what it said and once for what it was trying not to say. The document that broke it open was a property transfer from 1809, 4 years before Jonathan's death, 6 years before any of it had come to a head. A parcel of land in the northern part of the county transferred from one holding company to another. Standard language. Unremarkable. She would have passed it entirely, except for the witness signature at the bottom. Not a name she recognized. A notation witnessed in the capacity of county administrator on behalf of the Honorable R. Alderton. She stopped. She went back to Jonathan's list. She read all 17 pages again slowly. The name Alderton did not appear. But in the margin of page 11 in pencil so light she had nearly missed it the first time was a single initial A. She had read it as a label. A for something. The beginning of a notation Jonathan hadn't finished. She looked at it again now. A for Alderton. She took the page to Nathaniel. She showed him the margin notation. She showed him the witness signature. She watched his face. He went very still in a way she had come to understand meant something significant was happening beneath the surface. "Reginald Alderton," he said. "Who is he?" she said. "He is the president of the Carrickmore Assembly," Nathaniel said. "He has been for 11 years. He controls who speaks, who is heard, who is invited, who is quietly not invited back." He paused. "He is also the man who introduced Isabella Vance to Richmond Society 4 years ago. He presented her as the widow of an old colleague. He vouched for her personally." The room went very quiet. "He's above Fitch," Evelyn said. "He's above everyone," Nathaniel said. "He has political connections going back to the state legislature. He has land interests across 6 counties. Nathaniel stopped. He was Jonathan's godfather. She looked at him. Jonathan trusted him, Nathaniel said. Something in his voice was very careful, the way a man is careful around something that could break him. "When he was building the case, I told you he didn't want me involved until he was certain. I told you he wanted one Cole who was clean." He stopped. "He went to Alderton. I'm certain of it now. He would have gone to the man he trusted most. He would have said, 'I have found something. I need your guidance.' And Alderton told him to gather more evidence," Evelyn said slowly. "To be thorough, to be certain before acting." "And while Jonathan gathered," Nathaniel said, "Alderton positioned Isabella. Alderton warned Fitch. Alderton gave the order." His jaw was tight. His hands on the desk were flat and very still. Jonathan was killed by the man he went to for help. Evelyn watched him. She did not look away. She let him have the full weight of that, without trying to soften it, because she understood that some truths needed to be stood in, not cushioned. "We have him," she said after a moment. The penciled A, the witness signature, the connection to Isabella, the land interests that match Jonathan's list. It's not everything, but with the other documents with Samuel's testimony. "We need more," Nathaniel said. "His name carries more weight than all of it combined. If we stand up at the Carrickmore Assembly and accuse Reginald Alderton, the president of that assembly, a man with legislature connections, without ironclad evidence, we don't just lose. We get destroyed. Everything we have gets reframed as a vendetta, a grieving, unstable blind man and his opportunistic wife." She heard the frustration in him, the fury beneath the control. "Then we get more," she said. "How?" he said. "We have 3 weeks." She thought. She looked at Jonathan's page, 11 at the pencil initial at the property transfer. She thought about the letter she'd found in the desk. "The woman is in place. The records have been moved. If the blind man stays blind, there is nothing to find." She thought about the $60 payment in the ledger. She thought about Isabella Vance, sitting in the front parlor with dark red flowers, asking whether Nathaniel had been having episodes. "Isabella," she said. "What about her?" She's afraid, Evelyn said. I saw it the day she came here. She's been careful for 2 years, and then suddenly there's a wife in this house who asks very specific questions about Jonathan's inquest and doesn't react the way a manageable woman is supposed to react. She's afraid the situation is shifting. Evelyn paused. She'll go to Alderton, if she hasn't already. Probably, Nathaniel said. Which means they'll talk, she said. And when people talk about something they're afraid of, they leave evidence of that fear. Letters, arrangements, movements. She looked at him. Does Alderton correspond with anyone at Ravenfield? Has he ever? Nathaniel frowned. He sent a letter of condolence after Jonathan died. Is it in the house? A pause. It should be. They found it in Jonathan's correspondence box, which had been placed in the back of the upstairs study and not opened since his death. Evelyn read it. It was exactly what a letter of condolence from a godfather should be. Grief, warmth, offers of support, careful love. She read it twice. Then she looked at the handwriting. She looked at it for a long time. She got up, went to the library, and came back with the letter she had found in the desk. The one with the broken seal. The woman is in place. The records have been moved. She set them side by side. Same hand. Nathaniel, she said. He came to the desk. He looked. He did not speak for a moment. He wrote both, Nathaniel said. He wrote both, she said. Alderton wrote the letter in the desk, which means he wasn't just the order giver. He was corresponding directly with someone in this house. She paused. Who was he writing to? The silence that followed was a different quality than any silence before it. The letter was addressed to Nathaniel, Evelyn said slowly. Unopened. But... She stopped. But it was in the desk, in the sitting room, not in the library, not in your study, in the sitting room, which is William's domain. Nathaniel looked at her. William has managed this house for 20 years, he said. His voice was entirely flat. I know, she said. He was Jonathan's steward before he was mine. I know, she said. He was the one who... Nathaniel stopped. He looked like a man who had just stepped on ground he thought was solid and found it hollow. He was the one who searched Jonathan's study the second time. I couldn't stop him. I thought he was looking for Jonathan's things. I thought he was grief. I thought it was grief. It may have been both, Evelyn said carefully. People are rarely only one thing. He's been in this house, Nathaniel said. He knows every room, every document, every conversation. His voice was controlled in the way a person controls something that is very close to the edge. He knew about the box in the sitting room. He left it, Evelyn said. Because you were blind, because the letter was addressed to you, and he believed you couldn't read it, and there was no reason to remove a letter that could never be read. He didn't know my sight came back. No one knew except you, she said. And now me. Nathaniel pushed back from the desk. He stood. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her and said nothing. She let him. He turned around. His face was, she had no exact word for it. Not broken. Something past broken and on the other side. What do we do? He said. We don't confront him, she said immediately. Not yet. If he realizes we know, he'll warn Alderton, and Alderton will come to the assembly prepared. She paused. We let William believe everything is normal. We do not change our routines. We do not let him see us with the documents. She looked at the 2 letters. And we take these to the assembly in 3 weeks alongside everything else. And William, Nathaniel said. William answers for what William did, she said, but not before the assembly, after, when the whole structure has already collapsed. He looked at her. You are, he said slowly, the most I don't have a word for what you are. Practical, she said. No, he said. Not that. She picked up the letters before he could continue. She put them with Jonathan's documents in the tin box. She pressed the lid closed. Say, 8 days before the assembly, Isabella came again. She did not come with flowers this time. She came with an invitation, the Carrickmore Assembly's summer reception 2 days before the full session, a social gathering that Nathaniel had not attended in 2 years. She presented it with warmth and casualness, as though it had simply occurred to her that Evelyn might enjoy it. "Nathaniel, of course, may find it difficult," she said with the careful, sympathetic tone she used whenever she referenced his blindness. "But you, Mrs. Cole, it would be such a pleasure to introduce you to the county properly." Evelyn took the invitation. She smiled. "We'll both come," she said. Isabella blinked. "Nathaniel is feeling much better," Evelyn said. "The summer air has been good for him, and he has been wanting to re-enter society for some time. I think he simply needed encouragement." She paused. "You have encouraged us, Miss Vance. We'll see you at the reception." Isabella left with her warmth intact and something moving behind her eyes that was working very hard not to become alarm. Nathaniel appeared in the hallway as soon as the door closed. "You told her we were both coming," he said. "I did," Evelyn said. "She'll tell Alderton." "Yes," she said. "And Alderton will come to the reception to evaluate whether Nathaniel Cole has somehow impossibly recovered his sight and his stability and his intention to pursue the question of his brother's death." She paused. "And he will spend the 2 days between the reception and the assembly deciding whether to act before we do." She looked at Nathaniel. "Which means we'll know how serious he is by the reception, how he responds, what he does." "You're drawing him out," Nathaniel said. "I'm drawing them all out," she said. "Isabella Fitch Alderton. I want to know before we stand up at that assembly exactly what they're capable of when they're afraid." Nathaniel looked at her for a moment. "And if they're capable of more than we expect," he said, "then we need to know that before the assembly," she said, "not during it." The reception was held at the Carrickmore Hall, and it was, as Evelyn had anticipated, an exercise in watching people pretend. She watched Nathaniel move through it with the cane and the performance, and she marveled at him, the absolute consistency of it, the way he never slipped, never let his gaze land with the precision she knew it was capable of. He was extraordinary. She had known he was capable of this, but seeing it in a crowded room full of people who might have reason to test it was something different entirely. She stayed close to him without appearing to manage him. She watched Alderton from the moment they entered. Reginald Alderton was 60, silver-haired, built with the solidity of a man who had never doubted his position in any room he had walked into. He greeted them with the warmth of a man who had practiced warmth until it was indistinguishable from the genuine article. He clasped Nathaniel's hand. He told him it was wonderful to see him out. He looked at Evelyn with the pleasant assessment of a man calculating something, and told her she was a welcome addition to the county. She smiled. She thanked him. She watched his eyes. He was afraid. Not visibly nothing an ordinary person would catch. But she had spent the last 3 weeks learning how fear disguised itself in people who were practiced at disguising things, and she could see it in the fraction of a second too long that he held Nathaniel's hand, in the way his gaze moved to the cane, and then away in the particular smile he gave her that was 2 degrees too warm. He was afraid of what they might know. He was afraid of what they might do. And he was going to do something about it before the assembly. She was certain of that by the time they had been in the room 40 minutes. She caught him in conversation twice with Gerald Fitch, a square, florid man who laughed too easily and watched rooms from the side of his eyes. She caught Isabella once looking across the room at Alderton with the focused attention of someone waiting for a signal. The signal came an hour in. Alderton spoke briefly to a man she didn't recognize. Young, forgettable, the kind of person who was designed to be overlooked, and the man left the room. She leaned close to Nathaniel under the guise of adjusting his collar. "The man who just left. Gray jacket. Did you see who he spoke to before he left?" "Alderton," Nathaniel said without moving his head. "We need to know who he is." She found out 40 minutes later through 2 conversations and a careful question to the assembly secretary, a sociable, unguarded man who answered questions readily when they were framed as admiration rather than inquiry. The man in the gray jacket was a clerk, one of 3 who maintained the county records office. She went back to Nathaniel. "He's moving the records," she said. Jonathan's list, the fraudulent registrations. If the original records no longer exist, our documents become harder to verify, Nathaniel said. We need the records office, she said. Tomorrow, before they have time to act. The records office doesn't open until 9, he said. I know, she said. We'll be there at 8. They were there before the clerk arrived. Evelyn had spent the night with Jonathan's list and a county map identifying the specific parcel numbers for each fraudulent registration. She knew exactly what she needed and where it would be filed. When the office opened, she moved with the efficiency of a woman who had spent years managing records that other people didn't want examined. The clerk, not Alderton's man. A different one. An older woman with wire-rimmed spectacles and the resigned precision of someone who had maintained county records through 3 administrations and had no particular loyalty to any of them, watched her work through the filing system and said, "You know what you're looking for." "I do," Evelyn said. "Most people don't," the woman said. "Most people come in here and make me find things for them." "I've managed accounts since I was 15, Evelyn said. "I find things faster myself." The woman made a sound that was not quite approval, but was not dismissal either, and left her to it. She found 6 of the 7 registrations. The 7th Fitch's entry, the primary forger, was missing. The folder was there. The index card was there. The document itself was gone. Her chest tightened. She checked the neighboring files, the adjacent records, the return log. Nothing. She came back out to where Nathaniel was waiting and told him. 6 out of 7, she said. Fitch's is already gone. When? He said. The return log shows it was last accessed 5 days ago, she said. Before the reception. Before they knew we were coming to the assembly. They've been moving carefully this whole time, Nathaniel said. Not in panic, in sequence. Which means Alderton is more prepared than we thought, she said. He's been watching this house, watching us, and he's been removing vulnerabilities one by one. She paused. But he missed 6. And he missed Jonathan's documents. And he doesn't know about Samuel. Because Samuel never came forward publicly, Nathaniel said. No, she said. He's the one piece Alderton doesn't know exists. She stood in the county records office with 6 verified land titles in her hands, and the certainty that the next 2 days were going to move faster and harder than anything she had planned for. And she made herself breathe, made herself think, made herself be the woman who read the contract for 14 minutes and found the clause no one else thought to look for. There's something else we can do, she said. Nathaniel waited. The handwriting, she said. Alderton's letter of condolence and the letter from the desk, same hand. We have both. But handwriting alone isn't enough if his lawyers challenge it. She paused. We need a third sample, something officially attributed to him, something in the county record. The assembly minutes, Nathaniel said immediately. He signs them personally at the end of every session. They're kept here. She turned back to the records room. The clerk with the wire spectacles looked up when she came back in. Assembly minutes, Evelyn said. Last 3 years. Signed by Reginald Alderton. The woman looked at her for a moment. Are you going to cause trouble at the assembly? She said. Evelyn looked at her directly. I am going to end it, she said. The woman held her gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she stood, went to the back wall, and pulled 3 bound volumes from the shelf. Take what you need, she said. The signed pages are at the back of each volume. The night before the assembly, William knocked on the library door. Evelyn was alone. Nathaniel had gone upstairs an hour before. She had the documents spread across the desk, organized in the order she intended to present them. She looked up. William came in. He closed the door behind him. He looked at the desk, at the tin box, at the documents, at the assembly minutes, with Alderton's signature, at Jonathan's letter, and his face did something complicated and quiet. You know, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she said. He sat down in the chair across from her without being invited. He was an old man, and she could see for the first time that the weight he was carrying was not only the weight of loyalty. It was something heavier, Something that had been growing for 2 years. I didn't know what it was, he said. When Alderton came to me, Jonathan was already dead. He said the estate needed a protector, that Nathaniel was incapacitated, that there were things that needed to be managed. He paused. He said he was protecting the Cole family. I believed him. What did he ask you to do? Evelyn said. Keep the letter, William said. Just keep it. Don't let Nathaniel find it. He said it was a private matter involving the estate, and it was better left unread. He looked at his hands. He didn't tell me what was in it. Did you read it? She said. A pause. No. She looked at him. I should have, he said. I know that. I knew at the time that something was wrong, but he was Alderton, and I was... He stopped. I have served this family for 20 years. Jonathan trusted me, and I... He stopped again. You were afraid, she said. Not an accusation, a statement. Yes, he said. The room was quiet. William, she said, tomorrow at the assembly, I am going to stand up and present these documents, and I am going to name Alderton. When I do, he will attempt to discredit everything the documents, the testimony, Nathaniel's credibility, mine. She paused. Your statement that Alderton came to you, that he asked you to conceal that letter, that he told you it was about estate management and nothing more, that statement would be significant. William looked at the desk, at Jonathan's letter. Jonathan would have hated me, he said quietly. I don't know that, she said, but I know he would have wanted you to tell the truth. A long silence. I'll be there, William said. He stood. He looked at the desk one more time. He left without another word. Evelyn sat alone with the documents and listened to the house settle around her in the summer dark, and thought about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong, and all the ways it could go right, and how thin the line between them was. And she thought about Jonathan Cole, who had been 26 and meticulous, and gone to the man he trusted most, and paid for it with his life. And she thought, not this time. She organized the documents one final time. She closed the tin box. She went to bed. She did not sleep, but that was all right. She had never needed sleep as much as she needed clarity, and she had never been more clear. The morning of the Carrickmore Assembly arrived the way significant mornings always do, with an ordinariness that felt almost insulting, given what it contained. Evelyn was dressed before 6. She had the tin box under her arm by 6:30. She had reviewed the order of the documents, twice gone through the sequence of what she intended to say, identified the 3 points at which Alderton's lawyers would most likely attempt to interrupt, and prepared her responses to each. She had done all of this the way she did everything, methodically, without flinching, without allowing herself to think too far past the next necessary thing. Nathaniel found her in the library at 7. He was not carrying the cane. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything about it for a moment. Today, she said. Today, he said. I am done performing. Something settled in her chest. Not relief exactly. Something more like the particular solidity that comes when the last piece of a structure locks into place. All right, she said. He looked at the tin box. Are you ready? I've been ready, she said, since the morning my father sold me. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once and held the door open, and they walked out of Ravenfield together into the August heat. Samuel Briggs was waiting at the end of the drive with his hat in his hands. His wife had been moved to the main house the night before, under William's watch as promised. He looked at Nathaniel, at the absence of the cane, at the direct and unobstructed gaze, and something in his face shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. You can see, Samuel said. I could see the day you came to me, Nathaniel said. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. Samuel put his hat on. Don't be, he said. Let's go end this. William was already in the carriage. He did not speak when they got in. He sat with his hands folded in his lap and looked at the floor with the expression of a man who had made his decision and was carrying it forward because there was nothing else left to do. Evelyn did not speak to him. There would be time for that later. or there wouldn't. Either way, it was not the conversation for a carriage ride. She sat with the tin box on her knee and watched the Virginia countryside move past the window and thought about Jonathan Cole, who had been 26 years old and meticulous and afraid, who had gone to the man he trusted most and died for it. And she thought today, you get your answer. Heir. The Carrickmore Assembly Hall was already full when they arrived. Summer session drew the county landowners, lawyers, merchants, their wives, their associates, the whole interlocking apparatus of Virginia society. In 1815, gathered in a room that smelled of old wood and candle wax, and the particular tension of people who were accustomed to deciding things and were sensing without knowing why that today something was different. Evelyn felt it when she walked in. The attention. Not directed at her specifically scattered ambient, the collective awareness of a room that had registered an anomaly. Nathaniel Cole, walking without a cane, was the anomaly. She watched people see, it watched the micro-adjustments in their expressions, the small recalibrations of expectation. She watched a woman near the door lean to her neighbor and whisper something. She watched Gerald Fitch, standing near the far wall, with a glass in his hand, go very still. She found Isabella Vance in under 30 seconds. Isabella was standing near the front of the room in a dark blue dress, and she saw Nathaniel. At the same moment, Evelyn found her, and the warmth drained from her face with a speed that told Evelyn everything she needed to know about how much of it had ever been real. Reginald Alderton was at the front, behind the session table, speaking to two men in the unhurried manner of a person who believed the morning was entirely under his control. He saw them last, or appeared to. She suspected he had seen them the moment they walked in and had spent the intervening seconds deciding how to receive them. He looked at Nathaniel. He looked at the absence of the cane. He looked at Evelyn, at the tin box, at Samuel Briggs behind them. His face did not change. That was, she thought, the most frightening thing about him, not the fear she had seen at the reception, which had at least been human. This was something past fear, the flatness of a man who had decided that whatever happened now he intended to manage it. She had 3 witnesses, 17 pages, 2 matched handwriting samples, and 6 verified land records. She intended to be unmanageable. The session opened at 9. Alderton called it to order with the smooth authority of a man who had done this 100 times. He moved through the morning's business. 2 property disputes, a road commission appointment, a licensing matter with the practiced efficiency of someone burning through the agenda to reach the open floor where he clearly intended to control what happened next. He was not going to get to control it. Evelyn had positioned herself at the side of the room where she could reach the floor without crossing the full length of it. Samuel was beside her. William was 1 row back. Nathaniel was at her left, close enough that she could feel the steadiness coming off him like heat. When Alderton called for the first open matter of the session, she stood. "I have a matter," she said. The room shifted. She felt it, the whole weight of that crowded hall adjusting its attention. Alderton looked at her with the expression he had deployed at the reception, warm, authoritative, the particular patience of a man preparing to redirect. "Mrs. Cole," he said. "A pleasure. This is an open session of the Assembly. Matters brought to the floor require the submission of a formal." "I have a formal submission," she said. She held up Jonathan's letter. "I have 17 pages of documented evidence, 6 verified county land records, 2 handwriting comparisons, and 2 witnesses. I am bringing a formal challenge to the magistrate's ruling of June 12, 1813, in the matter of Jonathan Cole's death on the grounds of fraudulent testimony, concealed evidence, and criminal conspiracy." The room did not erupt. It went very quiet, which was, she knew, worse for Alderton. "Mrs. Cole," he said, and the warmth was still there, but something underneath it had shifted. "This is not the appropriate venue for—" "This is exactly the appropriate venue," she said. "The Carrickmore Assembly has jurisdiction over county magistrate rulings. Article 7 of the Assembly Charter ratified 1801. I have read the charter." She paused. "I have read it twice." Someone in the room made a sound that was nearly a laugh. Alderton looked at her. Something moved behind his eyes. The calculation, the assessment, the decision. Very well, he said. You have 5 minutes. I'll take what I need, she said. And she opened the tin box. She started with the land records. She named each parcel. She named each holder. She explained in clear and simple terms what Jonathan Cole had discovered, that 7 land titles in Carter County had been fraudulently registered, that the original grants had been destroyed and replaced with forged documents, and that the forgeries had been executed by Gerald Fitch and registered through the office of Thomas Carter County Magistrate. She watched Fitch across the room. He had stopped being still. He was breathing too fast, and his glass was no longer in his hand. She watched her father, Thomas Carter, who had arrived at the assembly 20 minutes after she had, who had not looked at her when he walked in, and was not looking at her now. He was standing very straight the way she had been standing on the morning he sold her, and she understood that they had both learned that posture from the same woman and were using it right now for entirely opposite reasons. She put the land records down. She picked up Jonathan's 17 pages. She explained what they contained. She read 3 passages aloud, the one naming Fitch as primary forger, the one naming her father as knowing recipient, and the one naming Isabella Vance as an intelligence operative placed specifically to monitor Jonathan's investigation. She heard the sound that moved through the room when she read Isabella's name. She looked up. Isabella was still standing near the front. She had not moved. She was watching Evelyn with the particular focused attention of a person who has run out of options and is waiting to see exactly how bad it gets before deciding what to do next. Jonathan Cole, Evelyn said, setting the pages down, wrote those words 6 weeks before his death. He wrote them because he knew he was close enough to the truth that something might happen to him before he was ready to act. He wrote them for his brother. She paused. His brother can now read them. She looked at Nathaniel. He stepped forward. He did not pick up the cane. He did not perform any adjustment, any hesitation, any of the 1,000 small signals of blindness he had spent 2 years deploying. He simply walked to the front of the room with the straight, unobstructed gaze of a man who could see every face in it, and he stood beside Evelyn and he looked at Reginald Alderton. "I was not blind the day Jonathan died," Nathaniel said. His voice was entirely steady. "I was not blind the day the magistrate ruled his death a legitimate duel. I was not blind the day the case was closed." He paused. "I allowed people to believe I was because the man responsible for my brother's death believed it made me harmless. He was mistaken." He looked around the room. He let them look back. "My name is Nathaniel Cole," he said. "I can see, and I have been watching every one of you for 2 years." The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Alderton broke it. "This is theater," he said. His voice was still measured, still controlled. He was a better performer than almost anyone Evelyn had met, and she had met several. "Mr. Cole, whatever your recovery, whatever has happened with your condition, that does not transform personal grief into legitimate legal evidence. These documents are unverified. The accusations against named individuals are—" "The handwriting," Evelyn said. She put the 2 letters on the table. Alderton's letter of condolence to Nathaniel and the letter from the desk, side by side. "Both written by the same hand," she said. "One is a letter of condolence from Reginald Alderton to Nathaniel Cole, signed and dated. The other is a letter found concealed in a desk at Ravenfield unsigned, reading, 'The woman is in place. The records have been moved. If the blind man stays blind, there is nothing to find.'" She put the assembly minutes beside them, open to the signed page. And here is a third sample of the same hand. The assembly session minutes, signed by Reginald Alderton, June 1814. She looked at the room. Anyone who reads can make this comparison themselves. The documents are here. She watched 6 people step forward to look. Alderton had not moved. He was looking at the letters the way a man looks at something he cannot quite believe has made it into the room. "These could be fabricated," he said. "Anyone can forge a—" "William," Evelyn said. William stood. The room turned. William was known 20 years with the Cole family, a figure as permanent as the estate itself. People trusted him the way they trusted furniture, without thinking about it. Mr. Alderton came to me in the months after Jonathan Cole's death, William said. His voice was quiet and utterly without inflection, which made it more devastating than anything emphatic could have been. He told me the letter addressed to Mr. Nathaniel Cole was a private estate matter and asked me to ensure it was not read. He told me he was protecting the Cole family. He paused. He was protecting himself. Another sound moved through the room, louder this time. "Samuel," Evelyn said. Samuel Briggs stood. He took his hat off. He looked at the floor for one moment, and then he looked up, and his voice was the voice of a man who had been carrying something heavy for 2 years, and had finally found somewhere to put it down. "I was at the south edge of the Cole property the night Jonathan Cole died," he said. "I saw the position of the wound. I saw the figure who fired from behind the stand of trees, a position no dueling opponent would have been standing in. The figure spoke to someone waiting with horses before leaving. A woman. Moving quick and calm, like everything had already been planned." He looked at Isabella Vance. "I couldn't see her face that night, but I saw her coat. Gray. Long. The kind a woman wears traveling." Every head in the room turned to Isabella. She was still. She had gone very still in the particular way of a person who is deciding whether to speak or to run. Alderton made his move. "This man is a tenant farmer," he said loudly enough to pull the room's attention back to him. "His testimony is motivated by this entire proceeding, is motivated by grief and personal vendetta. Nathaniel Cole has been unstable since his brother's death. There are physician records. The physician," Nathaniel said, "examined me 6 weeks after Jonathan died. My sight returned 4 weeks after that examination. I have not seen the physician since, because I did not want the recovery confirmed. If you wish to summon him today, he will tell you his last examination found blindness. He will also confirm that the examination was 2 years ago and that he has no knowledge of my condition since." He paused. "You have been relying," he said to Alderton, "on a 2-year-old medical record and a dead man's silence. Both of those resources have expired." The room was extraordinarily loud now, not shouting, but the dense compressing sound of 100 people processing something at once, talking to each other, moving, reaching for the documents that Evelyn had fanned across the session table for anyone to examine. Fitch made for the door. He didn't reach it. 3 men, none of whom Evelyn had coordinated with, none of whom she had spoken to, men who had simply been standing in the path between Fitch and the exit, stepped into his way with the particular solidarity of people who have just been told that someone in the room had a hand in killing a neighbor. "Gerald Fitch," one of them said. "I think you'd best stay where you are." Fitch stayed. Evelyn turned to Alderton. He was looking at her. Not at Nathaniel, not at the documents, not at the room. At her. And she could see in his face, in the precise and honest way she had learned to read faces in this county, that he understood it was finished, not managed, not redirected, finished. "You are 22 years old," he said, quietly, almost to himself. 19 when my father sold me," she said, equally quiet. "I've had a productive few months." He looked at her for one more moment. Then he sat down. It was the smallest possible gesture of surrender, a man simply lowering himself into his chair. But the room read it, the way rooms read these things, and the sound that went through it was the sound of something that had been held for 2 years, finally releasing. Isabella Vance did not sit. She moved. She had gotten halfway to the side door before Evelyn saw her go, and Evelyn was already moving, not running, not calling out, just moving, with the quick directness of a woman who had decided that Isabella Vance was not going to walk out of this room into the August heat and disappear into the first carriage she could find. She caught her at the door. "Miss Vance," she said. Isabella turned. Her face had shed every layer of warmth, every constructed pleasantry, every carefully maintained performance, and what was underneath was not what Evelyn had expected. Not cold calculation. Something raw. Something that might, in a different story, have been desperation. "You have no proof I fired that shot," Isabella said. Her voice was low. "A tenant farmer who couldn't see my face. A letter that doesn't name me. No, Evelyn said. Not yet. Then you can't. Jonathan named you, Evelyn said. In the letter. He named you as an intelligence operative with a documented connection to Gerald Fitch going back 5 years. He named you as someone positioned specifically to monitor his investigation. She paused. He also wrote that he didn't yet know who was above Fitch. He died before he found Alderton's name. She looked at Isabella steadily. But he found yours. Isabella was very still. Gerald Fitch, Evelyn said, is being detained in that room right now by men who are very unhappy with him. Reginald Alderton has just sat down in front of 100 witnesses after 2 letters in his handwriting were publicly compared. They will both be looking very shortly for someone to give less weight to their own actions by providing more information about someone else's. She paused. You could be ahead of that. Or behind it. The air between them was hot and still. What do you want? Isabella said. The name of who gave the order, Evelyn said. Not Alderton. Alderton organized it. Who decided Jonathan Cole needed to die, whose interests were served by his death specifically above and beyond the land fraud? Because Jonathan said there was someone above Alderton, and he died before he could find them. Something moved across Isabella's face that was complicated and ugly and entirely human. There isn't anyone above Alderton, she said. Evelyn waited. Alderton made the decision himself, Isabella said. Jonathan had gotten close enough that Alderton believed exposure was inevitable if he was allowed to continue. He didn't consult anyone. He acted. She paused. He told Fitch. Fitch told me. I arranged the logistics. Her voice was flat, confessional. The voice of a person who had been waiting to say this and hadn't known it until now. I didn't know he would. I was told it would be handled. I didn't ask what that meant. But you knew afterward, Evelyn said. A silence. Yes, Isabella said. I knew afterward. You will say this. Evelyn said to the county sheriff. Today, before Alderton or Fitch has the opportunity to give their version first. Isabella looked at her for a long moment. And if I do, I cannot promise you anything, Evelyn said. That is not in my power. But I can tell you that a person who comes forward voluntarily is treated differently than a person who is dragged forward. And you know that. You've spent years understanding how these things work. Another silence. Then Isabella straightened. It was a small movement, her shoulders settling, her chin lifting, and it looked almost like relief. All right, she said, thawing. The next 2 hours were the kind of hours that don't move in a straight line. The county sheriff arrived at the assembly hall at 10:30, summoned by 3 separate people who had all decided simultaneously that someone with legal authority needed to be in the room. He was a heavy-set, careful man named Collins, who took one look at the situation, Alderton seated, and silent Fitch being firmly kept in place by 2 of his neighbors, Isabella Vance standing near the side door with Evelyn beside her, the session table covered in documents that half the room had now examined, and asked very quietly for someone to explain it to him from the beginning. Evelyn explained it. She was concise. She presented the documents in order. She introduced Samuel, who gave his account again, and William, who gave his. She told Collins that Isabella Vance had information she was prepared to provide voluntarily, and she watched Collins look at Isabella and nod once, and she stepped back and let the machinery of justice, slow, imperfect reel, begin to turn. She found Nathaniel at the edge of the room. He was watching Alderton. She stood beside him and watched with him. Alderton was still sitting at the session table. He had not spoken since he sat down. He was looking at his hands, this powerful silver-haired man with his legislature connections and his 11-year presidency and his practiced warmth, and he looked more than anything like a man who had finally run out of room. Is it enough? Nathaniel said quietly. He was asking about the evidence, and he was asking about something else. Yes, she said. Both. He turned to look at her. Really look the direct, unguarded attention she had first caught in the study when the performance dropped and she had understood that the most dangerous thing in Ravenfield was not blindness or isolation, but a sharp, grieving man with 2 years of patience and nothing left to lose. "Jonathan would have liked you," he said. She thought about the letter she had read in the library, the careful, meticulous hand, the conviction, the love for his brother written into every line. She thought about a man who had been 26 and done everything right and been killed anyway by the man he trusted most. "I think I would have liked him," she said. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "When I chose you," he said, "I told myself it was strategic. The magistrate's daughter access leverage, a woman capable of managing an account book and finding things other people missed." He paused. "I told myself those were the reasons." "And now," she said. He looked at her with the directness that had no performance in it. "I was afraid," he said. "I had been afraid for 2 years, of getting it wrong, of being the second Cole who trusted the wrong person, I was afraid of having someone in this house who mattered to me because everyone who had mattered to me had either betrayed me or been taken." He paused. "And then you walked into my study and told me my father had not had a real conversation with you in 4 years, and you were going to fight me for the furniture clause in your own marriage contract, and I thought—" He stopped. "What did you think?" she said. "I thought," he said, "that I was in a great deal of trouble." She looked at him. "You could have told me," she said. "At some point, before you could have said." "I know," he said. "You are going to have to work on that," she said. "Telling me things, without waiting until I find them myself in a false-bottomed desk." Something crossed his face that was not quite a smile, but was the closest thing to one she had ever seen from him that wasn't managed. "I know," he said. "Good," she said. She turned back to the room, to Collins and Isabella, to the documents on the table, to Fitch being escorted firmly toward the door, to her father standing in the far corner, not looking at her. She thought about going to him. She stood with that thought for a moment and then set it aside. There would be time for her father, or there wouldn't. But today was not the day. Today was Jonathan's day. Thomas Carter was stripped of his magistrate's position before the end of the month. It happened the way these things happen, when the evidence is sufficient, and the witnesses are credible, and the room full of people who saw it all has had time to talk not with drama, but with the grinding, inevitable weight of consequence. He was not imprisoned. He was too old, too sick by then to hold his position anyway, and the men who made the decision were the kind of men who confused mercy with avoiding scenes. He lost the title. He lost the land. 2 of the fraudulent registrations were in his name, and the correction of those records required surrender of the parcels. He ended up on a small property outside the county with a housekeeper and not much else. Evelyn visited him once in October. She sat across from him in his small sitting room and looked at the man who had scratched his name at the bottom of a contract that sold her, and she thought about everything she could say, and she said the thing that seemed most true. "You had choices," she said. "At every point you had choices. I want you to know that I understand that." He looked at her. He looked older than she had ever seen him. "Evelyn," he started. "That's all I came to say," she said. She left. She did not go back. Gerald Fitch was tried at the county court and convicted of land fraud and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 7 years. He looked when the verdict was read like a man who had genuinely believed until the last possible moment that something would save him. Nothing did. Reginald Alderton's case moved more slowly, as cases against powerful men always do. His lawyers were good. His connections were real. But the handwriting was irrefutable. The assembly minutes were public record, and William's testimony delivered a second time in a court of law with the same quiet devastation it had carried in the assembly hall could not be managed or dismissed. He was convicted of conspiracy in the death of Jonathan Cole. He was 71 years old at sentencing. He died in custody 14 months later. Isabella Vance spent 8 months in county custody and was transported out of Virginia by court order. She would not return. Whether she found somewhere else the life she had been performing all along, Evelyn did not know and did not try to find out. Jonathan Cole's case was formally reopened and formally closed. The dual ruling overturned the death recorded as murder. The record corrected in the county books with the particular inadequate satisfaction of bureaucratic justice. It would not bring him back. It would not give him the 30 years he should have had. But his name was clean, and the truth was written down where it could be read. And that was something. Nathaniel went to the creek one afternoon in late September, when the Virginia heat had finally broken and the air had some mercy in it. Evelyn did not go with him. She watched him leave from the window and understood that there were griefs that needed space that didn't include even the people who loved you. He came back 2 hours later and found her in the library with the account books. "Well," she said. "Well," he said. He sat down. He looked at the desk, the cleared surface, the order she had made of things. "I told him," he said. "Told Jonathan. What happened? Who was responsible? That it's done." "Good," she said. "I also told him about you," he said. She looked up. "What did you tell him?" she said. "That I'd chosen better than I deserved," he said. "That the woman my lawyer recommended as sensible and not prone to sentiment had turned out to be—" He stopped. "What?" she said. "Catastrophically prone to finding things," he said, "in desks and creaks and the margins of documents, and—" He stopped again, and the something that had been building in his expression for months finally resolved into the full, unguarded thing it had always been underneath. "And me," he said quietly. "She found me." Evelyn set the account book down. She looked at him across the desk that had once held 2 letters in the same handwriting and a box full of a dead man's evidence. And she thought about the morning she had stood in her father's study and heard the scratch of a pen against a contract, and understood that a door was being nailed shut from the outside, and she thought about every choice she had made. Since then, the amendment, the carriage, the 14 minutes, the notebook, the creek, the assembly hall, all of it. And she thought, this is what it looks like when a door nailed shut turns out to have a window. "You were not particularly hidden," she said. "No," he said. "I suppose I wasn't." She stood. She came around the desk. She stopped in front of him, and she looked at him, the man who had spent 2 years performing absence while grief and fury and love for his brother moved beneath every surface, and she thought, "I see you. I have seen you since the first day." "Nathaniel," she said. "Yes," he said. "The accounts are balanced," she said. "The documents are filed. The case is closed." She paused. "What do we do now?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he stood. "We live," he said. "If that's agreeable to you." She considered this. "It's agreeable," she said. 5 years later, on an autumn morning with the light coming gold through the Ravenfield windows, Evelyn Cole sat at the library desk. Her desk now entirely in the way that things become yours, when you have fought for the ground they stand on and finished the final entry in the account ledger for the quarter. She heard Nathaniel's voice from the garden. She heard the answering laugh of their daughter, 2 years old, and already possessed of the particular determination that made William shake his head and say very quietly that God help them all. She was her mother's child. Evelyn set the pen down. She went to the window. Nathaniel was holding the girl with the practiced ease of a man who had learned to hold things carefully after understanding what it cost to lose them. He was looking up, squinting into the light, saying something that made the child laugh again. He looked toward the window. He saw her there. He raised one hand. Just that one hand lifted a gesture that said, "There you are." She put her hand flat against the glass. "There I am," she thought. "There we are." She had been sold for $3,000 on a summer morning in 1815 by a man who believed she was the kind of woman who could be placed into a story already in motion and would simply accept her position in it. She had read the contract for 14 minutes and changed the terms. She had walked into a house